title of the unit of study that we're in right now is called Interpreting Characters. And we're far enough now into our read aloud that we can introduce and talk about how you build an interpretation of a character. And obviously, characters in a fictional book, they say things, they act in certain ways, they may feel something inside if we're in the head of that character, if the story is told from that character's point of view. We might also be able to read body language and to build an interpretation using details such as that from the text. Okay? Our standard that we're working on is still our Reading Literature Standard 1.1, which talks about referring to details when we're trying to explain something that's either explicit, meaning it's right there in the text, or when we have to infer. And building an interpretation of a character often requires you to infer things. So I want you to stop for a second, and I want you to think back to the lesson that we had last week where we talked about creating that movie in our mind and how we took the details from the text and what we know. I'm going to wait until everyone's looking up here because your eyes have wandered, so your mind has wandered. In that lesson, we made a movie in our mind by taking the details from the text and what we know about life in order to actually see it and read ourselves into the event so that we're not just a bystander watching it, but we are experiencing it. We are in the book. All right? And that's really where you want to be in the book, because that's where you get to that diving deep understanding of characters. Okay? When we're thinking about the depth of a character, the depth of an event, the depth of a setting, it requires that kind of thinking, using the details to support inferences or what's stated explicitly. So today, what I want to show you and teach you is how you build an interpretation. And we're going to build an interpretation about Chascin. Now, I went back to the very beginning of the story, and I started taking my own notes. I had not been taking notes because obviously I am reading out loud to you. And I pulled out some notes, and I kept some notes on Chascin. Okay, now Chascin is a difficult character to build an interpretation on because we don't get a lot of information about Chascin. And because we're not in his head, it's not told from his point of view, we don't really get his part or his thinking, we have to use inference. And Harper, I don't know what you're writing, but you don't need your pencil in your hand right now. So please put it down. Okay, so in the first couple of chapters, we learn very little about Chascin. We meet him in chapter 1 when Mia and her family go to his house because they're interested in managing Michael Yao's motel, Chascin's dad. And so we learn that Chascin speaks English without an accent because he was born in the United States. And we also learn, though, that he still understands Chinese. So he understands a question when it's asked of him in Chinese, and he can answer it without an accent. Okay? Later on, we see Chascin again. Not long, I think it was 2 days from the day that Mia's family moved in to manage the motel. Chascin and his father come to the hotel, and that's when Chascin kind of hangs out at the front desk with Mia. They hear that raised voices in the living room, and they both go to investigate. Okay, because we are the reader and we know a lot about what happens, we already know that what Mr. Yao is doing is wrong. He is now saying that I told you the first 10 people and the weeklies do not count. So let me go back so that we can get some of the details. We're on page 27. Notice how I was able to mark my page so that I could go back and refer to the details, okay? And we'll start at the top of the page here, but it's only been 2 days. You said we could have $5 a customer. My mom said, those were your words. I said $5 a customer, not including the first 10 and the weeklies. Now stop for a minute and think what you already know. There are 30 motel rooms. At $5 a motel room, the potential, if they are all rented, is $150 a day. But now Mr. Yao is saying the first 10 don't count and the weeklies don't count, which means that's 15, because we know there are 5 weeklies, that 15 of the rooms, or half of the rooms, don't count in their salary. That means that the potential of $150 a day has dropped to $75 a day if all of the rooms get rented. So essentially, Mr. Yao is cutting their salary in half. And now he's saying, no, I told you that. I said that to you. Okay, so I jumped to my mother's defense. You didn't, I said. This is Mia. You said $5 a customer. You never said anything about first 10 or weeklies. No, I heard him, said Jason. Jason insisted. I narrowed my eyes at him. You weren't even there. You went to your room, I cut back. Enough, Mr. Yao yelled. That's the deal. Take it or leave it. Okay, so let's stop for a second and think about this. Think about these details and see if we can start to build an interpretation about Jason. Okay? So notice what we all know, because we read the story, right? We all know that Jason is lying, that Mr. Yao is lying. So let's start to build an interpretation. What kind of a person is Jason? Now, before I take your answers, I hope you recognize that question. You saw a question like that on your pretest. What kind of a person is Mr. Tillian? Okay, some of you answered, he's fat. And while certainly sometimes an author will use a description of a character in order to kind of infer something about them, being fat is not the kind of person you are. It's a physical description. So when we're asking what kind of person is Jason, we're asking more about the kind of personality he has. What is his personality? Okay, so does anybody have an idea of what kind of person Jason might be? Isabella? So not a leader, but more of a follower. And who is he following in this case? He's kind of following his father. Do you have a different idea?
I like Bratty. Like one of those like Bratty kids.
Bratty, you mean BR?
Yeah.
Okay, but how is he acting bratty?
Like he's lying to them.
But that's not being a brat if you're lying to somebody, is it? Maybe I'm not understanding. Can you explain? What do you mean by bratty?
Like sticking up for somebody even though you don't even know what happened.
Okay, I think that's different, though. I would almost say, if I was going to try to choose a more precise word to describe that, I would almost say that he's loyal to his dad, right? Because he's showing his dad loyalty, right? He's sticking up for his dad. He's taking his dad's side, right? Okay, does anybody have something different, or you all agree? Thumbs up if you agree. Okay, so let's continue though to focus on this character of Jason. But now we're going to move forward to the first day of school. Okay, and remember how excited that Mia was because she knew that she had something really cool to share. She thinks it's really cool and interesting that she lives in the motel, that she works for the motel, she runs the front desk, okay? So she's very excited to be able to share this, but just as she's sharing it, something happens. When it is my turn, I took a deep breath. Here goes. Hi, I'm Mia. I live and work in I was just about to say motel, when the door swung open. Sorry I'm late, a voice boomed. I turned around and walking through the door with his shirt half tucked in his pants, looking like he just woke up, was Jason Yao. All right, so what else can we infer here using the details from the text? Fiona? And he doesn't care what people think about him, right? Can you say a little bit more about that? What specifically doesn't he care about? His appearance, right? How he looks, right? He doesn't really care about that. What else, Caroline? Say it again. I don't know if I would say lazy. I suppose you could. He's too lazy to make himself more presentable. Maybe you could say, you could argue that builds again on what Fiona said. He doesn't really care about what other people think of him, especially based on how he's dressed. Anything else that you'd like to add to that? Yes, Linda. He also doesn't care if he's late, right? Not only that, but notice the way he comes into the room. His voice booms out, hey, sorry I'm late. Okay, so he walks into the room, he disturbs and interrupts everything. Okay, so we can see we're starting to build an idea of the kind of person Jason is, and obviously he's a complicated character. He's not just one way or another, right? He is loyal to his father to the point where he would lie to take his father's side. He doesn't seem to really care about his appearance or interrupting others. He's only kind of thinking of himself here, right? He's walking in. He's certainly not embarrassed about being late. He's proudly announcing it. All right, so let's move on a little bit more because now, as Mia's getting ready to talk again, Jason, let me slide it over here. Jason shot me a look. A don't you dare look. Heat rushed to my cheeks and to Jason's. Why didn't he want the others to know? Then later, Jason marched up to me at recess. Let's make one thing clear, Jason said. You don't know me and I don't know you. Got it? All right, so let's use these details and add to our interpretation. Why do you think that Jason does not want anybody to know that she lives and works in a motel? Why doesn't Jason want anybody to know that they know each other? Connor, what do you think? Come on, guys. You can think, Paige. Okay, so especially we get that detail. Mia thinks he lives in a mansion. So when she describes his house as a mansion, okay, he is probably wealthier than her family. Remember, they described her as wearing tattered clothes from Goodwill, and they lived in their car for a while, right? And then they lived in a cramped apartment. Okay, so certainly one interpretation we could grow is that he's very much aware of what we call class, like the wealthy and the poor. Okay, and that may be something that we develop as an interpretation, that he is very conscious of the difference between their class as far as money is concerned, and he doesn't want to be associated with somebody who's poor. Okay, what else? Okay, and that's very similar to what Paige had said. I thought it was interesting that not only does Mia's face turn red, but so does Jason's. What does it mean when somebody says their face turned red? What does that mean? What does that mean, Ian? Yes, they're embarrassed, right? They're embarrassed. They don't want anybody to see that. And you might have had that happen to you, where something happens and suddenly you feel like your face is getting all red because maybe you can't answer the question or something happened and you feel embarrassed. So that's reading into the physical description that he's embarrassed. If we build that onto a page, and Claire said he's embarrassed for people to know that somehow they know each other because she works at his father's hotel. Okay, that they're connected. Yes, Isabel.
He has something hidden that he doesn't want no one to know. And probably because he knows him a little bit, then they're gonna be asking her about Jason.
Well, maybe. Dylan?
I think he may be embarrassed because from his father's description of China, he may not want people to know that he's friends with somebody from China because, like the father said.
Okay, but the only problem with that is we haven't gotten to that part of the book yet. Okay? But definitely you could add that detail in. When we get to the part of the book where he finds her playing the piano and he reveals all the things his dad told him about China that were not necessarily true for Mia's experience of China, okay? Definitely we could add that to it and say, now that we know that, okay, that might be part of his embarrassment. Yes.
He might not want Mia to telling everybody that he does a big deal.
Okay, well, I don't know if that's the reason because we're not in his head, but certainly it's an interpretation. Okay, so what we've learned today is we need to take the details. We need to take the details from the text to explain things that are happening explicitly, we can see, but to also make inferences and grow interpretations. And that's the work you need to be doing when you're doing your independent reading today. You should be at a place in your book where you can focus on one of the characters and build an interpretation of the type of person they are, and then support your idea of the type of person they are, support it with text evidence. What details in the text make you think that? Now, the last thing I'm going to say before I send you off to work is, when we build an interpretation of a character, we hold it loosely in our hands. And what does that mean? To hold something loosely in your hands means that it's kind of fluid, right? You're kind of holding it, but you're not holding onto it tight. Because as you get more details, your interpretation is going to change. As you get more details, you're going to be revising your thinking about your interpretation. And so until we get to the very last page of, till we get to the very last page of the book, we hold our interpretations loosely, meaning that we are willing to change them, revise them, throw them away if they're so way off base. But we don't want to be set in stone with our first thought, because our first thought is not our best thought. So keep that in mind. Okay, so today during work time, if you have a red checker on your desk, you're going to be going on a computer. And Lydia, I'm going to go get that computer for you that has to be plugged in since you're so close to the plug. If you're on a computer, 2 things you're doing. iReady reading minutes and passing lessons. Achieve articles and passing lessons. All right, remember the articles, you have to get a 75% or above on the first try. That's what you're working on when you're in Reader's Workshop. If you get all of that done, you can go to Freckle Reading. But everything you do on the computer today has to be reading related. Okay, if your name is up here, Ava, Preston, and Alina, you're going to be meeting with me in small group up front. And I'm going to let you go ahead and move to where you need to be and get what you need. Don't forget to put the checker in the basket.